Too many people are sick, too many people are dead.
Since this photo was taken, 21 members of his team have died. Returning from Iraq, Doug submitted an unfavorable report on the use of depleted uranium.
Well, once I told the U.S. Army that it was dangerous, we couldn't clean it up, they couldn't do it, they sent me packing. Adios amigos. No, we don't want to hear from you, we don't want to talk to you. I mean, you got your job, keep doing things, but shut up and go away.
The U.S. Army never took Doug Rock's recommendations into account.
Falluja, extensively in Falluja, totally extensively in Falluja. Not a question. We see everything and all the other people, we see every place it's been used, we see it. I mean, you try to clean it up, but you can't. That's what I tried to do, and I couldn't. That's why I told him no more.
To find out more, I tried to reach Colonel Peter Newell. He was in command of the Battle of Falluja in 2004. I never managed to obtain an interview, nor would he even answer the phone. The issue appears to be embarrassing. The only answer I receive is a link to the U.S. Army's internet site. This article praises the merits of depleted uranium and minimizes its dangerousness. The only allusion to health consequences is contained in this phrase.
The Department of Defense and many other organizations have studied and continue to study the health, chemical, radiological, and environmental effects and exposures of depleted uranium.
That's all they wrote. To the U.S. Army, the use of depleted uranium is taboo. I did manage to speak to one former high-ranking official at the Department of Defense. Bing West was with the Marines at the Battle of Falluja. He later wrote a book, recognized in the U.S. as the reference on American strategy in the rebel city.
You heard about the depleted uranium? The white phosphorus? What can you say about it?
It's all nonsense. Depleted uranium or something, a bomb is a bomb. It's not like somebody's leaving behind radioactive so that the Marines walk through, radioactive fields, then all the Marines die. If any scientists show a linkage between lingering health problems relative to a military weapon, then that military weapon should not be used unless there's an extraordinary reason. However, if there is a lingering problem, the first people to be affected would be the soldiers on the battlefield. And I know of no soldiers who are complaining about uranium.
Yet it's not that hard to find American soldiers contaminated by depleted uranium. A few kilometers from New York, Gerard, Janice, and their children are to all appearances a typical American family.
People get me tired.
Apart from one detail. In 2003, Gerard Matthews served more than 6 months in Iraq.
The truck driver, we transported what you call like blown up equipment. Things move around in the truck, so we have to tie it down. So that's when susceptibility of being exposed or sleeping in an environment with your trucks. Because some of the missions don't take just one day, it takes more than one day.
Gerard fell ill several months later. The early symptoms seemed trivial, standard headaches, problems with his vision, but his state quickly worsened. The beginnings of a brain tumor, renal problems. The list is long.
I have leakage, and I'll show you to the extent how much I have leakage.
Today, Gerard has to wear diapers. But there's worse. His daughter Victoria, conceived after his return from Iraq, has a deformed right hand. This picture is a reminder of Falluja's deformed babies. His story has made headlines all over the world, but Gerard isn't the only one to fall ill. 8 of his comrades in arms who served in Iraq have shown the same symptoms. Urine tests reveal an abnormal concentration of uranium.
I never was told about depleted uranium in the military. I never attended class. I never went to a class on how to handle equipment that were exposed to it. I didn't even know what depleted uranium. The last time I heard, not even depleted uranium was when I took chemistry. Yeah.
Gerard believes he was contaminated during his mission in Iraq. He decided to file a formal complaint against the U.S. Army, claiming it broke safety regulations by exposing him to radioactive material. His wife has gone even further.
She wrote every senator and almost every representative, and everyone was basically, this is just one of them, she wrote, was sending back letters.
At the time, even President Bush's office had taken up the issue.
On behalf of President Bush, thank you for your letter. Thank you for the letter I wrote to him on the border. And he said the White House is sending your inquiry to the following agencies: Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, and Social Security Administration. And that's the correspondence we got from them.
No assistance was provided, nor any response to these questions.
I feel they owe him an apology, because to this day, to an extent he loves the Marine Corps. I don't understand why. But he always says that if something happens to him, he must be buried in his Marine Corps uniform. And that upsets me, because I don't understand how faithful he is and how committed he is, and I have to respect his wishes. So for me, I don't understand how the government can actually treat a man that way, but still, to an extent, honors his country.
The Army refuses to recognize its responsibility. 6 months in Iraq were enough to shatter the lives of Gerard and his family. In Falluja, thousands of inhabitants still live in these buildings destroyed by American bombing. 7 years in a contaminated city. Falluja's hospital is short-staffed and cruelly lacks medical equipment. Nothing can be done to save these children, so to keep evidence of their births, a photographer has been drafted in by the doctors. Why are you photographing them?
Why am I photographing them? It's for our database. We try to keep it updated every month.
These photos are unbearable. Most of these babies will only live for a few hours. Every month, 20 or so babies like these are born and then die in this hospital. Not to mention the countless newborns with serious illnesses.
You see, most families would rather the children die. I remember one day, a father said to me, each time I see my deformed son, I die.
A generation sacrificed. And how many more? For these children, it's already too late. Faced with this human catastrophe, the Iraqis are powerless. But to prevent the tragedy of Falluja from happening elsewhere, some people in Europe are starting to take action. In London, a stone's throw from the Houses of Parliament, Bunny Easton camps out on his pavement every day. He has been campaigning against the war in Iraq since 2005. His spot at the foot of Big Ben is well chosen to attract both Londoners and tourists. Behind him, photos of deformed babies are exhibited for all to see. Shocking pictures that attempt to boost public awareness.
We aim to expose not just the wickedness of war, it's the wickedness of the weaponry, the shells of the bombs and rockets, the outer bits of the armoured cars, all made of depleted uraniums left over after they've made the atomic bombs. I mean, we've got a poster there entitled A Different Nuclear War.
The slogan and the slew of Iraqi baby photos haven't managed to rally great support, but Bunny Easton isn't alone in his fight. Others are campaigning on a different scale. An NGO network, present in around 30 countries, is also campaigning for a ban on all depleted uranium weapons. Its headquarters are in Manchester.
maybe show you some materials that we campaign with and some of those from other organisations. So we have briefings, which, because it's a very big and quite complex issue, DU, so we try and pull together all the necessary information into an easily digestible format. This was a briefing which we produced for members of Parliament in the UK a few years ago, so this is the national campaign, and we held a parliamentary briefing there. It's always a challenge to try and get politicians up to date on the issue.
Douglas is all too aware of the consequences of uranium-based weapons. He has studied the subject since the Balkan War in 1994. In that time, he and his team have devised a method for identifying and decontaminating bomb zones. His first battlefield was in Bosnia, where the Americans were already using depleted uranium weapons.
This is a map of a place in Bosnia, which was the site where DU weapons were used in 1994 and 1995. There were quite high levels of contamination at this site, so we've been doing quite a lot of work around that just to try and map where DU has been used.
In Bosnia, the organization identifies 12 highly contaminated zones. This information enabled the Bosnian Environment Ministry to take steps to limit the damage.
This is one called Borovac, which was decontaminated in 2007. As you can see from here, it's a pretty extensive task that they have real problems in trying to identify the actual sites where DU is. That's a DU round that's being developed. It starts to break down in the soil. So the yellow you can see on the outside is uranium oxide, and with about 300 grams in each of the penetrators.
Collaborating closely with the local authorities, Douglas was able to work freely in Bosnia. In Iraq, the situation is much more complicated.
The problem that we see is that there are three quite different kinds of contamination in Iraq. You'll have the contamination from the tank ammunition. Obviously, children quite enjoy playing on World War wreckage, and so that was one problem in itself. Then you have DU from aircraft strikes, where you may end up with a lot of contamination in the soil. Then you'll have another kind of contamination from the armoured fighting vehicles, which again fire a small caliber round, and that will definitely be within built-up areas. So you have three different kinds of contamination. All of this needs to be mapped. But at the moment, the US hasn't released data on where it's fired any of these weapons, and this is a huge issue.
To obtain this information, militants have demonstrated outside the American embassy in London, but the US Army still refuses to provide it. In the meantime, the NGO is attacking the British government, also accused of having used depleted uranium weapons in Iraq. Recently, these accusations have even been taken up by a British member of Parliament during a session.
The Leader of the House may have seen today's distressing reports about the increased rate of birth defects in Falluja. Can we have a debate about this issue so we can hear from the Foreign Secretary what representations he is making to his US counterparts about this appalling legacy of the Iraq War?
In 2010, the British Ministry of Defense finally admitted the use of depleted uranium in Iraq and supplied the United Nations with information on the zones targeted. The US allies beginning to voice its doubts on this weapon. Only Belgium, Ireland, Costa Rica, and New Zealand have formally banned uranium in their arms. But today, no international convention even mentions depleted uranium in its texts. This allows the US administration to continue using it without fear of reprisals. At the Illinois Law Faculty, Francis Boyle claims that the USA can be hauled before a tribunal. This lawyer and Harvard graduate has an international reputation. Agent Orange in Vietnam, Gulf War syndrome, war trials are a specialty. Today, Francis Boyle is locked in a new battle to have the use of depleted uranium recognized as a war crime.
Uranium munitions violate the Hague Regulations of 1907, and then DU also violates the Geneva Protocol of 1925. So their use of DU is clearly a war crime.
Is it illegal? Why is it illegal?
It shouldn't be. But why does the United States use landmines? Why? We're trying to stop it. The problem is how how do you bring the rule of law to bear on the United States government? It's very difficult to do it, especially on the Pentagon. They're a law to themselves.
That's why it's so hard to bring the United States to heel. He sees isolation on the international stage as being the only way forward.
I think if we can get all the parties to the Geneva Protocol to send in that letter to the French government, now apparently even the British are willing to go along with this, and the U.S. then is the only outlier on DU. Just maybe they'll say, okay, let's stop using DU.
Francis Boyle's cause seems a desperate one. The United States continues to make use of uranium in developing their military arsenal. In 2003, 1 year before the Battle of Falluja, Donald Rumsfeld, then Defense Secretary, made a reference before the U.S. Congress to the use of a new weapon, the Hellfire missile.
The new missile can take out the first floor of a building without damaging the floors above, and is capable of reaching around corners, striking enemy forces that hide in caves or bunkers.
This declaration went largely unnoticed, but it heralded the development of a new missile that would be tested during the early days of the war in Iraq. Some experts did react to Rumsfeld's declaration. One of them was arms researcher Di Williams. This scientist is a member of the UN Institute for Disarmament Research. He claims the Hellfire missile is a new generation bomb. It was used several times during the Battle of Falluja. The experts call it a thermobaric weapon.
They were using small tactical weapons, but they wanted these new thermobaric weapons, which are specifically designed for very local killing. And what they do, if somebody's right in the target of it, they just get fried. It is so high temperature, it just burns everything. But also, if they are within maybe 50 meters, it will also kill them because you get a bang, and it sucks all of the air out, and so you get a pressure wave, which goes high pressure and very low pressure, and the air pressure goes down to maybe 10% of normal. And if you're in that area, your lungs collapse. You can't breathe.
Di Williams has not only analyzed the photographs of the bombing in Iraq, but has also listed the new types of thermobaric bombs developed by the U.S. Army. Once again, they remain very discreet as to the use of uranium.
We have 9 different new weapon systems going from 100 kilos up to 2,000. And if you look in the report, all they say is dense metal. It says dense metal warhead, dense metal ballast, high density payload. When you realise what they're trying, they're using every word they can except in uranium. But they're saying this is a secret heavy metal, but they never say what.
According to Di Williams, these thermobaric bombs were showered on the rebels who had taken refuge in houses in Falluja.
You can see how much smoke and contamination. That's a mixture of concrete dust and bomb dust. If that is using uranium, then you've got 500 kilos of uranium dust in that. All these spread over that part of the town. And they're celebrating, and they don't realise that they're looking at their own future cancer. And it is just, it's so sad.
Hell yeah, bitches! See you in fucking hell, dog. See you in fucking hell.
My biggest question for Falluja is probably that it was an experimental area for new thermobaric explosives, probably uranium, possibly other new chemicals which we haven't even thought of yet. And so this is where, looking at the birth defects, we have to question which systems we used.
Was my parents' hometown of Falluja used as a laboratory by the U.S. Army? How long will Iraqis have to suffer the consequences of the war? The Bush administration boasted of waging a clean war, but it continues to sacrifice generations of children, both in Iraq and the United States. In Falluja, 2 to 3 deformed babies are born every day. Most live but a few hours. The space in the cemetery reserved for these victims grows steadily.